In the Dropbox. Go ahead.
This call is being recorded. I have long-term audiences I want to probably work with. So those are the other two. But the audience I believe is that I would like to serve is, I don't want to call it men's work, but, and I think we've talked about this before, but it's masculine work and masculine energy work. It's
okay.
But the very specific audience are just the people that are going through the same thing that I'm going through. That just may not be where I'm at, because even though I feel like I'm like, whoa, what am I doing? Where am I going? I feel like I've already had stuff happen. I'm somewhere where other people aren't at yet.
You only need to be one step ahead.
Yeah.
That's it. One step.
Right. Exactly. And so I want to serve the audience of men who have I don't necessarily want to be in the stage of like calling people out and like bringing awareness to who they're being, unless it's just absolutely necessary.
You mean addressing their being an asshole type of thing? Or
yeah, I don't necessarily want to. I don't want a lot of, and I know that I don't.
Yeah,
that's
no,
part of,
I agree.
It's one of my defenses. It's one of my fears is conflict and confrontation, and maybe that's what I need. I don't know, but because Luhan, my teacher, he has no problem calling people out on their shit. Like, and it's like, it's not done in a mean way. It's like, just wakes you up to who you're being, which is it's a hard place for somebody to be in, like because all the defenses just fly back up, and it's like, what are you talking about? What? Who? Me? No, I'm not doing that. So I don't really want to be at that stage. I want to be at the stage where I'm at, helping people. Is basically, I've had all this. I've had all these walls up, all these defenses, all these deep ruts that I'm in. I still have them. I'm aware of them. I'm aware of, I think, some of them. There's probably ones that I'm not aware of, but I'm in this new space of like, I have been an asshole. I have been doing this. I have been this. I want to change. And I have really no idea where I'm going with it. And that's not the only place that I'm in. I'm also like, because there's going to be a lot of people that are in that place, but they already have a career. They already have money. They already have, so a lot of things already figured out in other aspects of their lives, but there's this one aspect. So I'm in a place of like, I don't have a lot of those other aspects figured out either. Like I don't know how to generate money for myself. Because I've had, and this is probably the key thing, I've had all these walls torn down. It's kind of like there's this newborn baby that just emerged, and it's like, who am I? But now I'm not a baby because I can actually wipe my own butt. I can actually feed myself. I can actually take what I've learned and put it to use. So I'm raw. I'm this body, this thing that can produce and do things, but it's inside, it's going, well, who am I? What is my purpose? And how am I going to go about doing it? So I think if I can, it's kind of like this journey from it's the journey from boyhood to manhood. I'm kind of all of a sudden, I'm shedding the skin of the boy and the false man away from me. And now I want to show up. I want to arrive. And now I want to thrive. And I want to shed all that other bullshit that's just wasting and taking up my time.
So what do you think the key word is for the kind of masculinity you're talking about?
The key word for the kind of masculinity that I'm talking about. Well, the first word that comes to mind is authentic.
Okay, it's a good keyword.
But it's got to be authentic something, doesn't it?
Well, I'm thinking but being authentic actually is the ultimate target.
Authentic masculinity.
But yeah, so that could be it. I actually have a suspicion though, that because keywords will shift.
Yeah.
Ultimate keyword for you should be authenticity. And inside of that authenticity is the ability for you to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And I think true masculinity can be vulnerable.
Absolutely.
Right. So that as an outsider looking in, based on knowing you for a while now and then hearing you talk, currently, I think the guidance play that you have before you is that path to your own vulnerability, which is your authenticity, is the thing that will allow you to serve others, because you're, almost all healers need to be healed. Coaches are healers. So might as well do the work that you need for yourself. Might as well share with others that, because again, you're one step ahead. You already have wisdom. They don't. You might be 5 steps ahead for all that matters, but I'm saying you have to be only 1 step ahead, but you are probably way past that. Your confidence will really grow when you start to realize you're probably 10 or 15 points past everybody else. So the idea here is how do you build confidence around your ability to be vulnerable and still maintain your masculinity? Because vulnerable doesn't mean become a doormat. Vulnerable means you're willing to be a doormat, so to speak, and never will be.
Well, it's like you said in that talk that you learn martial arts so you could have the strength to be vulnerable. So you can be vulnerable and defend yourself if it's attacked.
So there's a character, I just watched an interview with Stephen King and the last name is Lee. He wrote the Reacher character.
Jack.
Is it Jack Lee?
No, Jack Reacher, I think.
Jack Reacher, but what's his name? Something Lee.
Ang Lee? I don't know. That's
no, it's English Lee, not Chinese, not Asian.
I don't know. Stanley? He's a comic book guy.
Yeah. Lee Child is his name. Sorry.
Lee
so
Child,
first
okay.
name Lee. So one of the things he said was really interesting, because I've watched there are 2 movies with diminutive little guy Tom Cruise playing Jack Reacher. But the character that Lee Child writes about is this bulky, brutish football head, type of sized, character, very tall, very capable, kick-ass, super strong. Yet he's not running around looking to kick ass. Kick ass follows him. So he ends up having to do it more, because he's snarky. He's, he has a comeback for everything that's ever said to him. So he's kind of belligerent or combative in that way. But he doesn't walk around with his hulking presence just looking for butt to kick.
Right.
Wherever he goes, he knows he's okay, because he's developed that strength and doesn't have to run around showing it. But when he needs it, it's there. So he's capable of very developing certain kinds of relationships. And is now on, I don't remember if it's Netflix or Prime, but now there's a whole Reacher series, first season just played. Very well done, by the way. So if you have time to watch it, do it. And he is the bigger guy. He's not the little tiny Jack Reacher that Tom Cruise plays. And you can see he's got sensitivity, and his masculine is not just brutish. It's gentle, a gentle masculinity that's capable of being a brute when it comes to needing to be a brute. And I say that because I was watching this other thing yesterday. It was a guy who thought he owned the gas station, so to speak. He was like the neighborhood guy. One of his parents had died. He inherited a lot of money, so he was basically not working. And he packed firearms. He'd learned from some skirmish that he couldn't have the firearm in his truck. He had to have it on him. So he walks up to this car that's parked in the handicap spot at his gas station, his neighborhood gas station, and he starts screaming at the woman that's there. Over here, you got to park here. And then she rolls down her window. She happens to be black, and she starts screaming back at him. Who the fuck are you? And and then her boyfriend, who's in the store, comes out and walks up and sees this altercation taking place. And in no uncertain terms, he gives the guy a shove of shoves, and the guy goes falling on his ass. And so what does he do? He pulls out his firearm. The boyfriend now knows, I can't stand around. He backs up. He's turning to go back to the store, and the guy shoots him. And ultimately, he succumbs to the shot. That is bullshit masculinity. That was a guy who was looking for trouble. That was not a guy who was looking, to serve or be aligned or gentle or no. He had a fragile ego, and he needed somebody to push around. And when he couldn't push somebody around, he shot him. Now, I'm not saying the guy was completely in the right by pushing him on the ground, but he was no longer a threat when he was turning to walk away, and he got shot by this asshole. So, and I'm bringing these two stories together because there's a distinction, whether it's the martial arts story or in this case, like, where does the line exist for, okay, even if you're carrying around a firearm for your protection, where does the line exist for true protection? When is it you're protecting your ego, and when is it you're protecting your life? This guy was protecting his ego. How dare you push me down was what was really going on in this guy's head, because the threat was gone. It's all on video. So anyway, I'm sure I'm telling a very long story for a very short point. The idea here is that our authentic selves are kind, gentle, but we have inner power. We have strength. We have power of purpose, power of clarity, power of self-defense if we need it. None of that should come to the table unless it's an immediate, real threat and not one of those ongoing things where we think we're always under siege. This guy was always under siege. The other guy I was telling you about. He had such an ego that he just had to go around and almost be a bully in order for him to feel any sense of control over his life, which obviously just made him less controlled. But yeah, but that's what people do when they don't serve the authentic self. There's no authentic self in that guy running around. That was his shield. His fragile ego had put up this whole thing. Firearm makes me strong, and I can now go out into the world and tell people I can create conflict because I'm protected. Would he have done the same thing he did if he did not have a firearm in his pocket? Probably not. And that's actually why the guy's going to jail, because there was no way he could refute what was on video, and there's no way he could refute what he did in his interview at the police station, where he told this story about how that he thought he was going to get punched further. Never once did he say he was in fear for his life. Like, that could have been an argument that he, even if it was not rational for you and me, maybe he had an irrational fear for his life, but that never came up. So,
yeah.
So being like a Jack Reacher maybe is far down that path as you want to go in terms of having that kind of power of force versus power of confidence. The guy at the gas station, that was a power of force thing. That was the only thing he knew, was to be force, to exert him, to push himself. It's almost like, I almost think like this, is if you're a vulnerable, strong person, you have a very small footprint. Because you're kind, you're gentle, you're not walking rage, you're not walking to boost your ego from external circumstances. You've got that inner peace, that inner calm. So anyway, and long story is just sort of amplify the value of, yes, authenticity is the ultimate factor. Authenticity is the I am. Authenticity is breathing. Authenticity is being in the moment. Authenticity is being kind even to somebody who's being unkind to you, because you realize it's not a mortal threat, because your ego is no longer dependent on what others think. It's only dependent on what you think. So I've watched you over the last few years, and it's like the thing that was happening with you, and was that you were evolving, but she was remaining triggered. I'm not saying she wasn't doing her own growth. She just was growing in some other place or some other way. But you, and even today, you probably still can trigger her. It's less so, I bet, because of some distance and things, but even today, I bet you can trigger her. So, and possibly vice versa, you know. I know that her words have had a lot of weight with you, and have left you even in almost a state of depression at times, because it's almost like, this is going back a while, and that's not necessarily where you are today, but it was, as I was watching you, is she had the ability, as you were starting to build confidence, to torpedo it. Not necessarily consciously or anything like that, but she would just say, not good enough. Whatever it is, you're not showing up the way I want you to show up. Even if you were actually starting to show up the way you wanted, she wanted you to show up, she wasn't able to see it because she was still triggered. Now, I don't know what was really happening behind the doors with you guys. This is just what I pick up from talking to you. Had you had, and I'm not, I look at my own relationship with my ex-wife, and had I been who I was today, we'd still be married. But I wasn't who I was today. There's no going back. She hasn't done her work either, like, she's done a little bit, but she hasn't done all, so there's no going back. That I can sort of say, and I have no lamentations. I'm not here going, oh, I live a life of regret because I didn't. I'm just knowing, I know if I was like I am today, we would still be married. We'd still probably have our challenges because she's got triggers and things that she's never worked on. She's been a victim many times in her life and never really worked on it.
Right.
And although I was not a physical abuser, I still victimized her emotionally. So the pattern of victimization has followed her whole life. Had I been aware, we might still be married today. However, it doesn't mean it would have been still a healthy marriage, because if she's not doing her work, she was never getting victim services, never getting support, never any things like it. Based on what I know, I would not be her best source of guidance here, because the person you're married to or have a relationship with should not be your coach. They will be your examples, but they're not your coaches. So anyway, going back to this whole thing. So yeah, I think you've got the idea of talking about masculinity is, and that, are you aware with the divine feminine and masculine? Do you know the difference between divine feminine and masculine? And
so I was really moved by a book I read, or it was actually an audio book I mentioned before, that I listened to by David Data.
Mm-hmm.
And it was about the dance of the masculine and the feminine energy. And it was, I took a lot away from that book. It was very powerful. And so I have an awareness from that book. So I mean, I could go into detail, but yes, I think I understand the masculine and the feminine. And that's why I will say just this one thing. That is why I don't like the term men's work. I much prefer, or men's groups. I much prefer masculine work, masculine's group, because if you could be in your masculine, then you would learn to dance with the feminine, and vice versa, because we all teeter-totter between masculine and feminine. And the problem happens when, like with
Oops.
where a masculine energy it doesn't hold her feminine energy, and now she feels like she has to cross over to the masculine. Now you have two masculine energies and they don't dance. So
Okay. Well, in the human frame, masculinity can be toxic, or it could be vulnerable.
mhm.
And so that could be a huge part of your guidance for people. And you can even do masterminding on the subject, so that you're the expert in the room, so to speak, but you're letting them all talk to each other. So, and I advise you to do masterminding sessions when you start coaching and when you get groups. Let them mastermind. Don't be the only person in the room with the answers.
No, I mean, yeah, that's what happens with the men's group that I attend now. It's once a month, and I really like the facilitator, and I hope to actually train with him.
Okay.
But that's one of those things that when I have the money to invest in these various things I'm interested in, that he's somebody I'll go to, and do his program maybe. But
There's the divine feminine and divine masculine, which is a little different.
I just need to turn my heat up.
No, but you're in Northern California, right?
I'm on the coast though. While Northern California is burning down, this continuously remains cold. What is it right now? So right now it's 63 degrees, believe it or not. That's a shocker.
For me, 63 degrees, that's shorts weather. Shorts and t-shirt.
I run cold though. I run cold.
I
think it's because I lived in Hawaii.
Yeah, I used to run cold.
Yeah, I'm constantly, I've got fleece lined, sweater.
Yeah, I got my poor neighbors, they must freeze just watching me go out. Like, I go outside in my shorts and a t-shirt to take the garbage out, to pick up the newspaper from my mother, to check the mail,
Yeah. Well, you're just going out there for a few minutes.
I know, but they all of them, every last one of them puts on a parka to take their garbage out.
That's so yeah. So the divine masculine and the divine feminine.
The divine masculine and the divine feminine are inseparable. So the reason why I'm mentioning this is just to give you an idea is that in the human frame, we all have a masculine and a feminine side also, but it's not necessarily divine in the context I'm going to share with you in a minute. And so we have, maybe you could even argue that our vulnerable side can be a feminine side in terms of the softness of the energy, the compassion that can be attached to it, and things like that, nurturing. And some of that will kind of transform into the idea of the divine feminine and masculine, but in more like that divine feminine masculine, you might think of as yin and yang, as kind of I want to be careful with the word duality, because I think there's so much more to the world than just dualities, or the universe than just dualities. That is just the idea that kind of almost like fear and love could be argued as oppositional but embracing energies. Like, you can't completely erase fear from our lives if we didn't understand fear. So we have to understand, we have to have at least an understanding of fear, for fear to service when it's proper fear, if there's such a phrase. So the divine feminine and divine masculine is just when you're recognizing that there are attributes of our energies that are happening, perhaps we'll even call it at the soul level, where this is not my area of expertise, but I just want to let you know, if you're going to be talking about masculinity, you might want to familiarize yourself a bit in some depth of this language of the divine feminine and masculine, because it's not quite otherworldly. It's very much part of our experience, yet it's not the same as what we experience in our physical frame, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. And I'm sure it's what he talked about. I don't know. Let me see real quick what that book's called. Oh shit, I need to plug my computer in. Give me a moment. Minimize this. Oh, cool. A little window popped up with you in it. Hi.
So like in the divine feminine and masculine, in our human experience, you might consider like brain and heart. Brain masculine and heart feminine.
Right. So the book I read was, and this is not it, it's called Intimate Communion, Awakening Your Sexual Essence. But I think oh yeah, so A Man's Way, The Way of the Superior Man, that was basically the one that was talking about the masculine and the feminine.
David Data. Okay.
Data, though, is spelled D-E-I.
I have it. I found it. Yeah.
D-A, right.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see any of the chapters saying the divine anything. It's just there's the way.
Yeah, I think I don't know. So far, every time I've heard anybody teaching about divine feminine and masculine, it was always women.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Anyway, yeah. All right, how do I expand us? There we go. I realize I can choose a virtual background here, huh?
Yeah, as long as your computer can process it and your background, and you have an Apple, right? So you should be able to process anything.
I don't know. It just, when it's virtual background, it just says none.
Oh, you have to load them. Just hit the plus sign and they'll come, the default ones will come up, and then you can.
Oh, really? Oh, it's asking me to go into my own stuff, which I really don't have anything. I can go into my photos. Interesting. Can you don't see like that thing that you don't see what I'm doing though, right?
No.
There we go. How's that?
I'm not seeing it yet.
Yeah, it's not.
You have to make sure you select it too.
Your device requires a green screen to support virtual backgrounds. Okay, now I said I have green screen.
Well, there you go.
How's that? Is that is that a good one?
It's a perfect face for you, man. That's the gentle masculine part of you. But you know what? The thing about it is like, oops, your child,
right,
is going to constantly be pushing you up against this toxic masculine versus vulnerable masculine, or the power of force versus the power of confidence type of thing,
right.
And because he is a male in the human frame, he's going to be testing you along the way as well. all relationships are there for us to learn from.
Right.
So the biggest challenge for us as parents is almost, in this some sense, is always being like 2 or 3 steps ahead. It's the same guidance when you think about it. It's the same kind of thing where I don't have to have all the answers. I just need to be more answered at the moment so that I can be a proper guide. Remember, you're not doing it for them, including your child. You're not, whether you're coaching somebody or not, you're not doing it for them. You're just giving them feedback and information, and maybe even helping them test themselves, or whatever the case may be, so that they can start figuring it out for themselves. So, so your role as a coach is you're not out there playing the game. You're on the sidelines, giving them plays that they should consider.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. So, yeah, and I think like to really, instead of making a big long like explanation of what I just think I want to help men.
Right. Well, I mean, it may be a little early to actually do this. I just wanted to get some preliminary, because I'm pretty confident. Like I never in a million years saw myself as somebody guiding the victims of narcissists and guiding narcissists to a healing place.
Right.
So 2 of my clients are males who are narcissistic, fragile ego to narcissistic. I'm going to be working with them a long time. Takes a long time for that. Meanwhile, victims of narcissists are so eager for change and so eager for development and recovery. They do everything in a few short months.
Mm.
They need more intense work or more focused and more actually available time because they're doing the work all the time. Whereas the narcissist, you're opening the door, letting get some awareness. Once you have some awareness, you can't quite go back, but the door will close because they'll fall into the reactive patterns. Then the door opens again, gets a little wider open. They're a little bit more aware, but they fall into their reactive patterns. And then, and eventually that door swings open and they go through it. That it takes a long time because narcissists are so used to framing their experience and modulating how things show up for them. They don't get the authentic experience. They're getting the curated experience.
Yeah.
And you, like in my own case, having done that for over 5 decades, it was a necessary survival tool. And when I first started talking to you, I don't think I had this label of me as a narcissist. I didn't really think about it until I realized, oh my gosh, my mother's a narcissist, not malignant like my father, but she's a narcissist. So I'm here taking care of her and I'm going, no wonder I didn't come visit her for 30 years. I did, but it was as rare as possible. Like I didn't really like hanging out with her. And now I realize why. So when you're a kid, the reason why you develop these curated experiences is because it's the ultimate shield for survival.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to deal with your own pain. You don't have to, you can kind of just, and it's a bludgeoning through life. The challenge comes down to is if somebody is a narcissist, can they ever become aware? I believe most narcissists will go to their grave highly, if not completely unaware. They're very reactive. They'll gaslight everybody. They can't be wrong. So if you can't be wrong, you can't learn anything. So, and if you ever call a narcissist, they'll tell you, no, it's not me, it's you. Because that gaslighting thing kicks in. So
what is gaslighting again? What is that?
It's where you try to make the other party wonky. It comes from the phrase though of like, there was a movie called Gaslight, by the way, so it may be very derivative from that, but the idea is when we used to use gas lanterns instead of physical light bulbs like we do today, there were shadows always being cast because the flame would be moving around. And so nothing was fixed in the image. It was always shifting based on the shape of the switching of the flame. That's what gaslight It defines the idea that somebody's not, they're on shaky, you're putting somebody on shaky ground by gaslighting them as opposed to solid daylight. If that makes sense. Does that
So
make sense?
what's an I feel like I've done that all my life.
Gaslighting?
If it's how if it's how I like being kind of shifty, trying to be a chameleon, trying to get what I want from that person and without, yeah, I don't know. It's if that's what it is. So if that's what it means to just
Well, it's just like you go out of the way to defend.
Yeah.
So you pretend, so you might say, I don't understand what you're talking about. Or you might say, you're just crazy, or you imagined it. That's not what happened. Or you might be questioning the other person's memories, saying you don't remember correctly. Or you might say, you might pretend to forget yourself, and even though you may actually remember.
Yeah, that's me.
Yeah. Trivializing the other person's feelings.
Yeah.
So that's what gaslighting is. The actions of gaslighting are, and then the effects are profoundly non-positive for the person who's affected by, who's the target of it.
I've been gaslighted and I have gaslighted. Ooh, now I gotta turn that heat off. Sweating up. Okay.
So anyway, who knew in my own particular journey, and as I'm working on my platforms, I'm going to be working on a specific play for helping people who are defined, who are willing to say, I'm probably a narcissist and I don't like what's happening to me. Those are rare. Most narcissists are so reactive they can't fathom that they're the cause of their unhappiness. Victims of narcissists know what a narcissist is intimately, that they have their own patterns. Otherwise, they wouldn't be involved with a narcissist. The narcissist is a continuous pattern, probably parental abuse of some kind or whatever the case may be. So where was I going with that? Who knew that I was going to have this focused play? And I have a specific book I will be developing not too far down the road on exactly focused on where narcissism comes to play in affecting relationships. It's my assessment that half of the world is narcissistic. It's a spectrum though. So you could be extremely malignant like Donald Trump. Or you could be like my mother, where it's just always about her. Attention getting type thing. So.
Yeah, that's me.
At age 85, she's not going to change. You can change. In fact, you won't design a change, by the way. You'll reveal to yourself that the stories that you lived by, this is, we've had this language before, so it's not, it'll just be a refresher. Every time you recognize that something is not serving you, then the real thing is how do we release that story? How do we make sure that story is really a lesson and not a trapped emotion that is making you triggerable or defensive or occupies your energy when you should be moving forward, and it keeps you stuck or whatever is going on. So, and then the other aspect of our journeys is to reveal our authentic selves. That's the true story. That's who we're supposed to be. And as you've been going through these shifts for the last 3 years or 4 years now, you're just, this idea of being a coach tells me that you are already understanding that authentic story piece is out there, that you've had more and more of that revealed to you. And it's just a matter of making sure you continue to release those stories that aren't yours, the ones that were installed by your parents, the ones that were installed by patterns that showed up for you to reinforce the stories your parents told. So you have maybe subsidiary stories and all the kind of thing. It could be stories that happen from a past life. They could be stories that happen from genetic memory. something that happened to your mother that she never even told your father, that was implanted into you epigenetically because maybe she was raped, or who knows what it is. So there could be so many things that we don't know always the source of the story. We just know there's a story. And as a hypnotherapist, I never care what the story is. I only care what the meat of the story is. What's the key element? What's the gem? We don't need to know where it's from. We just need to know, what is it?
We never need to know.
You don't need to know how come you have that story that doesn't work for you. You just need to know you have the story that's not working for you. And then you need to figure out what is it underneath, emotionally underneath that story. Almost always it leads to fear to some degree, but whatever, but just saying, let's release the fear, that's non-trivial. You have to kind of get, there has to be, I won't say an intellectualization. It's almost like a heart actualization, but the idea is when we realize that, let's look at my own story. It's always best for me to tell my own stories than tell other client stories, right? So in my own story, like, why was now recognizing now, and it was like during COVID, I got to have this self-examination and going, holy shit, I wasn't just an asshole, which is my original label for what I was a narcissist. Because I did gaslight people. I could never be wrong. You could never challenge me on something without it being me trying to make you, I have to be right. I have to be right. As a narcissist, your ego is so fragile, you can't be wrong. So, the story behind that is deep down inside of most narcissists, I'm using my own stories, is that I learned to protect myself from others who were heaping their shit on me by developing this cinematographic view of who Brian Baird was, even though it wasn't authentic, to protect myself from those people. So they would see me as a non-threat, or see me as a good guy, or they would see me as the smart guy, or they would see me in ways I wanted to be seen, even though deep down inside, I didn't believe this stuff. But I didn't have the conversation with the deep down inside person. So you could never convince me in a logical, external, brain-centered function that I had been doing this. I wasn't having any conversations with the inside. The scared little boy that was trapped inside, the scared, lonely little boy that was trapped inside there, would do everything in his power to not feel scared, lonely, and little. And that's what creates that curated external view. And you're so busy making that external view, that's the story you're living by, but it's not authentic. So, and even with my journey with the one that I was going to co-journey with, we're going to do this business work, we're going to make the world a healthier place, mental health, physical health, the whole 9 yards. For sure, I thought she was the one, because she was so different than my wife in so many ways. But then in the end, she was exactly like my wife. Why? Because I had not really gotten the patterns down, including the one that was most important to me to learn was grief. Once I had processed that, it's not that I'm complete, but boy, was it a huge leap forward. And everything I have had has been these like snapping rubber band leaps. There's always, but the idea is that, I miss her. I enjoyed the early versions of who she was, but in the end, I showed up like her ex-husband because that's what she kept pulling me into. And the flip side of that, she showed up like my ex-wife because I hadn't really released that either. And then the grief. She was the trigger, but I had, between my father and a lifetime of other things, I had never processed grief once in my life in a healthy way. So
yeah, I don't think I have either. And I need to.
Well, if you need to, then you just do it. I realize what I just said is probably sounds like, well, it's easier said than done, and that is true. But
it is. because it's been a big thing for me, is wanting to be able to process grief,
Right.
to kind of release the floodgates.
In many ways, grief is the one emotion that has power without attaching fear to it.
Say that again.
Grief is the one emotion that has really strong attaching power, but is not attached to fear.
Right.
You can have grief with no fear. You can have fear of grieving. That's a whole different thing, but you can experience grief without it being a fear-based element. So there are other emotions besides fear, non-positive emotions like fear, that can have a hold on our life. But if you want, most of it is loss, which can develop fear-based decisions down the road, but unprocessed loss can give you trigger action behaviors, which may be attached to a fear of more loss. But the actual energy of grief is not the same as fear. Loss or grief can create fear mechanisms, but if you can embrace, and this may be why your next leap for yourself may very well be that being able to process grief, lean in on grief, own that grief, revel in that grief, which is in many ways very uncomfortable, but ultimately it's the most transformative thing that we can do for ourselves, is to say, I'm going to grieve. My first coach told me my major issue was I wasn't grieving. So I said, yeah, I just did it. I did the exercise you gave me. I processed my grief. And she looked at me like, okay, I'll take your word for it. Now, she died last summer, but I really wanted to tell her that I had finally done the work.
So how does a person do that? I mean,
so first of all, any emotions are our messengers.
Oh, so you're sitting with your emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
You're going, what is in the grief? What is the message?
Yeah.
If you don't process grief, you're not getting the message. So, and there probably is a common element. I would argue that there's a common element for everybody's grief, and of course it starts with the word loss, but and the thing is there's probably something as unique as your own DNA that makes your grief your grief. Like, I can identify with grief and I can understand what you're going through because of my own processing of grief, but your particular vectors of grief may be rooted in something very different. I had a rageaholic parent that put me on this path. A loss of innocence, a loss of control, a loss of power, a loss of self-love. I had like all kinds of losses attached to things that were going on in there. So, and the power of grief is to heal. You have to sit in it. You have to get the message. You have to just go, okay, it's not comfortable, but I'm willing to be sad. It's not depression. If you're processing grief, it's sadness. It's not depression. It can be depression if you don't process it, but it's just sadness. So, for me, I had some really healthy cries just by leaning in on it. And it was about 3 months of intense, I did nothing extra, nothing extra, because I just needed to almost, like, if there's such a word as revel in your grief, own it, embrace it, listen to it, feel it, understand it, intellectualize it where you can, but it's a heart-based thing, so it's not so easy to intellectualize grief. But there is these things that's going on, and by actually going through this stuff, and then I have to say I wasn't completely done. So when oops appeared and triggered the grief, circled back through several months later, and I thought, well, maybe we have some room to rekindle this, and maybe we can correct it and all that other stuff. But a year after that, I was like yelling at her, I do not trust you. That's the last time we talked, October of 2020. And it's true, I didn't trust her. And the reason why I was angry is because that's one of those elements of processing grief. And because she was the trigger and she was there, I just said, I don't trust you. And I couldn't trust her. And she could call me today and say she was wrong, and I still wouldn't trust her because I don't think she's done the work. She's one of those people who waits for everybody else to do the work, and then she says, I'm healed. So
I feel like that's kind of what I was going through towards the end of last year's, that what you're describing, but I don't feel like there's just so much more that was going on. I didn't have my own space.
mm-hmm.
So interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like I don't want to overthink it, and I don't want to force it. I just, because I'm still kind of in that place, like, well, maybe, you know, like, I don't want to get into that thinking like, oh, well, am I not doing this right? Or maybe I haven't done it.
I don't think there's a right or wrong though, but it's just,
yeah.
If it takes you 10 years or 10 weeks or 10 days to process grief, it's whatever is meant to be. The challenge being is that the sooner we're able to, so if there's, and I'm not convinced that there can be necessarily a shortcut to processing grief. In fact, I don't believe you can artificially process grief in a shorter period of time. It's whatever is what the idea is. It's like going, okay, why are you grieving? I mean, you lost a marriage, you lost a partner, you have lost innocence from your youth, so you probably are carrying some of that with you. You know, not necessarily the same losses that I had, but you had losses because you had a kind of a dispassionate father. I can't remember what your story with your mother was, but but you had kind of like distant parents, from what I can remember from our conversations, that the parents weren't completely in on you, which is something that may be part of how you're parenting. Oops, you know, that you're, you know, by releasing this grief and getting into that power and self-love space that you've been getting closer and closer and closer, and we're always works in progress. So it's not like we'll ever be 100%. So it's not like there's anything wrong with who you are. But the idea is that you know that it's not that you are wrong with who you are today. You just know that you want to experience more, right?
Yeah.
More peace, more joy, more love, and then all of those things that come up then is like less reason to be angry. Like, you know, in my own journey, I don't get loud that often. My brother can piss me off. Why? I have never taken the time to analyze it. I just don't hang out with him.
Yeah.
It's not worth the energy for that. But my mother, who I'm living with, she gets me mad too. And I have to sit there and go, the best way for me to process what comes up is just say, that's your shit. I don't need to respond to it. And it's something as simple as telling me how to load the dishwasher. I've loaded dishwashers for 50 years. I don't need to be told how to load the dishwasher.
She just has her ways.
So I basically say, you know what, I'm okay with you loading the dishwasher, and I just turn around and walk away. You know, I don't have a horse in that race. You know, I load the dishwasher because I'm trying to be helpful. But if I'm not, never yell at the person who's trying to help you because they're not doing it right. Never. And I'm sure you've experienced being yelled at for that, right? You're not doing it right. You asked me to help you. I'm here. No, you're not doing it right. What good is that? That doesn't help. So,
yeah.
So anyway, grief is, it's a huge release when you finally are able to process it. And as I said, we're always works in progress. So we release grief, but there's always going to be a little hindrance.
Grief is, so basically it's not like this one thing that happens. It's when something comes up, when a feeling or an emotion comes up, and it's not like happy, whatever. It's recognizing it and letting it, and just kind of letting it be what it is.
Right. We are primed as human beings to hold on to things like narratives, voice, things, material things, relationships. We're primed to do that. Now, when we see somebody who's not doing that kind of stuff, they're throwing everything out and they don't do anything to have an intimate relationship and all that, I can guarantee you that there's probably a lot of grief in there.
Right.
But everything. So that's their mechanism for processing grief, is just to not ever feel that kind of thing again. They just put the walls up. and I'll share with you. I think I shared with you the stories is that when I was still in college, and I thought about killing myself. I just was so miserable from this series of relationship issues that came up for me. And I just said, and I had my leg, the 13th floor of my dormitory building had windows that would open. I had my leg out the window and one inside on the ground, on the floor of the 13th floor. And I remember thinking, it'll all be over if I just lean a little farther. But there was enough of that survival instinct in me. And I said, you know what? I'm never going to feel this way again. I'm never going to feel this sad again. I'm never going to get this low again. And for the next 30 years, I operated in a very narrow emotional band. No highs, no super highs, no super lows. But that's not authentic, and it's not aware. It's a resistance of sorts. It's very controlling. Just another aspect of my curation. And I had the discipline to do it because of my practice as a narcissist.
Right.
But until I learned to have those highs and lows and release myself from that story of I'm never going to do that again, and then ultimately processing the grief was the next level lesson that came up in 2019 in particular. That was the depths of going, it wasn't just an oops, it was my entire life of loss that I had never processed. I always swept grief under the carpet all the time. My grandmother died, dog died, girlfriend left, got divorced, father beat the shit out of me. He actually whipped. It was his belt. It was never a beating per se. It was a belt.
Yeah.
And all the other elements of grief that happened along the way, like crashing my 1968 GTO. Minor grief, but it was still grief. Minor loss.
Yeah. It is.
I mean, think about it. You get it. I don't know. When was the last time you had a brand new car? Oops.
I bought that car that we have that you were in Hawaii.
Okay.
I mean,
So
I don't
the first time that you got a scratch, did you go,
yeah,
fuck. That's a form of loss. Giving up my lung, a form of loss. Giving up a piece of my lung. So we always have loss come our way. The question is, are we going to continue to sweep it under the carpet, the grief that comes from that, or are we going to embrace it, hug it, hold it?
Yeah. Yeah, I have like a silly example of, but yeah, I don't even need to get into it, but that's interesting. Yeah. Huh. Yeah, I was really having feelings about something and it took me a while to get over it. But then I kind of had this thing in my mind was like, okay, I need to let it go now. I experienced it. There's nothing I can do to change what happened. And if I let it go, the universe will provide it again. Or as my friend said, you'll just stop worrying about it. and it was true. I was like, okay, enough's enough. I've grieved this loss and I can move on now. There was something healing about it. It's like now when I think about it, I'm like, oh, well.
Right. So you have the thing that's very important when it comes to non-positive emotions is that we can still remember the experience without attaching the emotions.
Yeah. There's no emotion about it. I can laugh about it now.
Right. So the interesting thing about the difference between grief and other non-positive emotions is that the other non-positive emotions we can actually, in many ways, release just by, almost like taking a breath. The drawback for grief is that there is no instant release for grief. You have to embrace it. So it sounds like it was there, and you finally had it there long enough that you were able to maintain the history without carrying those emotions.
Yeah.
So that's why, like, when somebody has had a major loss and they want hypnotherapy, it's not a good idea, because you cannot shortcut grief.
Yeah. Yeah. So just kind of curious now that it's kind of coming closer to, it's almost 12:30, but how do you see like this process happening and unfolding? Like, is there, I know I'd asked if we had some sort of like a process or curriculum or whatever, but I mean,
Well,
what do you
it's
do
very
so-
organic, but if you want to know the way the process has worked so far, is at the beginning conversations, at the end of every session, I don't have any homework for you at the moment, but at the end of every session, there's likely to be some homework.
Okay.
And there may be some homework in the next few minutes. I don't know. I haven't thought about it.
Well, I mean,
But the idea is what's the homework, if there is any, and so the first part of the next meeting is like, okay, how'd the homework go? Let's do
Right.
the housekeeping stuff. Then we have to ask ourselves, is like, relative to this goal, and let's just say the goal's just broad spectrum statement, the goal is to be a coach, without fully defining what kind of coach at the moment.
well, it's just to be a coach and to establish a business, coaching business, to where I'm making money and hopefully replacing my,
Okay. So you are making a livelihood, not a living, a livelihood as a coach. Meaning
yes, a
it's
livelihood.
lively, energized, thriving.
I'm thriving. And I mean, like, where I can be like, hey, spring break, let's go down to Disneyland. Let's go down to LA this year. I mean, this like next year.
Mhm.
Be like, hey, okay,
Okay.
we're gonna take your spring break, which
Oops.
is just ending, and we're going to go to LA. We're gonna go to Disneyland, and we're gonna go to San Diego and go to the San Diego Zoo, and we're gonna spend a week down there.
Okay.
And
So, and by the way, unless you've completely erased your postmarital nest egg, you should do that anyway. You know, I realize you're dipping into what you may feel compelled to hold on to, and you should have some buffer. However, something that important, time on an adventure, can be worth its weight in gold. So,
well, I'm hoping, so I'm hoping to, it's not a lot of money. It's what, $5,000 maybe. I was hoping to use that with that coaching, for that coaching.
okay, I don't know how much you have as your postmarital nest egg, so it may very well
It's
be.
just $5,000, but
Okay.
I would want to, my idea was I could take that, I can do one of these courses and learn how to make more money doing what I want to do, which is help other people. And quite honestly and frankly, selfishly, or whatever you, however, narcissistically, or however it is, but help myself in the process.
Well, that's not, helping yourself is not narcissism, as long as you recognize it as part of your all direction energy. It's like putting the oxygen mask on first.
Yeah. So that's what I was hoping to do with that nest egg, because
oops,
Justin was put it towards a car, but I'm hoping that a car, I'm hoping that a livelihood, I'm hoping that a trip to Disneyland, or whatever the hell it is that I want to do with my son or myself, is the product of this investment, this financial and whatever investment that I am. And also another product will be having the time to do what I absolutely love, is write my kids' stories.
Mhm.
I mean, when I don't have
oops,
during the week, I try to get to bed where I'm asleep by 9 o'clock or even before that, because then I wake up at like 4:30. I do a quick exercise and I get ready for work real quick. And then I write for 2 hours. And I swear, Brian, it goes by like that. It's like the happiest moment of my life. So that's what the nest egg is for. I was like, when I was thinking about investing in a car, fuck no, I want to invest in my future.
So what are you doing to get around now?
Oh, I get a ride to work. I pay somebody $10 a week. Or when
Oops.
sleeps with me at my house.
Oops.
Me ride in the morning. And then like,
and then you also have, I don't know how far it is, but worst case worse, you could always do ride share or walk or whatever.
No, you can't get ride share here.
No,
we're in the middle of nowhere. Yeah, no,
sounds like an opportunity. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no, I know. There's a yeah, and
oops.
Sometimes like I'll have the car and sometimes she'll have it. She needs it because she picks and takes
oops
from school.
Right. But it sounds like she's saying you could get a car. It gives you a little identification what pressure she's feeling in terms of
no, I was the one that was putting the pressure on.
Okay.
And because she's like, I don't think it's the right time. And as soon as I had said something about coaching and wanting to invest that money in a coaching thing more than the car, I mean, nothing was ever said about it. She was like totally respected that decision.
Okay.
I was like, thank you for supporting me and backing me. And she's like, I'm not supporting you and backing you. I'm it's that decision. I'm respecting that. That's, and I like that, but anyway.
Well, so you're going through the process, just to finish helping and understand, is the process is very organic because I have this, what you're going through is as unique as DNA. Like just to sit there and teach you how to do certain things certain ways right out of gate, and I'm going to share this because of my own personal journey. I'm very, you put me into an arena, like I used to own my own computer consulting company. So I was the rainmaker. I was the one who found the project work. I was the one who sold the big ticket items. Nobody else in my company was a sales guy, but they were all my implementers. They were all the ones who helped fulfill what it is. And I also I had a lot of experience doing something called capacity build out. So when I felt like I wanted to build to the next level, I didn't try to sell something and then hire somebody to fill that role. I've hired somebody and then I went out and sold something because I knew I had had confidence in my product, which was my company, to fulfill the project and not leave somebody kind of like getting the short shrift because I didn't have the resources when I needed them, so to speak. So, and it wasn't fair to my other employees to make them have to take it on the chin because I brought on a project that we weren't ready for. So I did things a little differently than most people. Even for a small company, it was always about building out capacity first. However, the thing that I had to go through for myself is this idea of like doing business coaching and then ultimately doing with the stuff that you and I did, which was the personal development work. The business coaching was something that I had to, in many ways, figure it out for myself because there've always been coaching programs. There's John Maxwell, Tony Robbins, Bob Proctor, Proctor Gallagher Institute. He just passed away, by the way, about 2 or 3 weeks ago. Bob Proctor was something close to 90 years old. So there've always been these coaching programs that are out there, and and if you go back far enough, this Dale Carnegie Institute, there's always been this stuff that's been going on. And there's a part of me goes, well, I'm smart. Now, remember, at one point, I also didn't accept any mentors in my life because I didn't trust them. So that was part of the whole thing that was going on too, is I wouldn't let somebody come in as an expert because I couldn't allow myself to be seen as not already knowing or weak enough that I didn't know something, or having to have somebody else teach me. Was almost like, it was just a strange energy, but it's a common energy in narcissists. So so until I really had my own first coach and I allowed that coach into my life, I didn't know what it was like to be coached. And I learned so much by having that one coach, but I learned so much about doing things in my own path, because I learned about the fact that what serves me is not the same thing as it serves. There's no cookie cutter approach to being a coach. That's what I really want to say.
Okay.
Why? I did do some training programs along the way that were coach oriented, mostly to audit them, just to see what they were like and things like that. And I recognized very quickly that they were focusing on things I wasn't ready for. Some of that money was wasted because of that.
Right.
Because teaching me how to build a business and teaching me how to use my gray-haired experience aren't the same thing. So when I'm working with my clients, it's like, so it starts with, if there was homework, first time it's a different story, but if there was homework, what did we do? How did it go? What came up for you? What things like that? We revisit the discussion about what do you feel like is the right story for you in terms of what can you imagine, what you want things to look like. If you don't know, that's information too. If you don't know, that's information to follow through on, to figure out what is blocking you from figuring it out. What do you not yet know, or what do you not yet feel, or what do you feel that you shouldn't feel? We need to release all these other things that are taking place so that you can get clarity on your purpose and passion. So inside of your purpose and passion, and that's the why and all these other things that are taking place, that's when you get to have a really good conversation about how you want to serve and who you want to serve in that service. And I do have homework for you. I just got it.
Darn it.
It'll be a really good 3 questions that you'll have to answer.
Oh man.
But the idea here is that it's not a classroom.
Right.
Eventually I could teach you the marketing. Eventually I could teach you public speaking, if that's something you haven't done before. Eventually I could teach you how to manage a Zoom session as a facilitator. Eventually we could start packaging your content so that when you're stepping out on stage of life, not just the physical stage, you're stepping on a stage of life, you're all ready with your message and your purpose. Kind of like what I did with Jesse. That was his first foray into actually publicly discussing. He doesn't want that released, by the way. He wants to redo the show, which I will do with him. I'll do that for him. But the idea is
it is released.
It's unlisted.
It's on your channel.
It's unlisted though.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So only if
Cool.
I share it.
I just thought of something. There's something I absolutely love, and I want to know what you think about this, and if you think maybe it's something we should do. I think this is super cool. There is a podcast called Startup.
I think you shared this with me before.
Right. The guy basically, he's like, I don't know how to start a business. I want to start a podcasting business. And he just started, that was his first podcast. And I was like, what if, I even had this thought when we were talking, like, I mean, I know that probably we don't want this particular conversation as our first one, only because maybe we want to, because I think as friends, we can talk about things like
oops
and things that we can talk about with, like, that may not be politically correct, for lack of a better word. But I thought it would be cool to create a YouTube channel documenting my process of becoming a coach, and also all the shit I needed to process and become a man and all that stuff. And just something so raw and so like not creating something where, oh God, I don't even want to see my first shitty comment, because there's those trolls out there. Like here I am, I'm fucking raw. You can call me an idiot, you can whatever, and I welcome it, like, because everything's exposed. And that's just an idea I have that I think would be fun, because it would start getting content out there. It would start getting followers. Like, here's this guy who doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. And there's going to be all these people that are going to like say like, well, you just don't have the shit figured out, or this is what you should do, or join this cohort or whatever. But I just thought it would be fun, because it would create an audience, and it's real. It's real. It's like, what the fuck do I do? How do I do this? How do I get money? How do I,
Well, I see no reason why you can't start, start recording those kinds of things. And even if you are storing that content and releasing it selectively, absolutely agree with the idea of being raw. You will find, forget about the trolls, those people are, they're just, it's a reflection of them, not you.
No, I'm not worried about trolls.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's just the eye. So you will find, by being that kind of raw, you are going to get tremendous amount of feedback that's positive, and you can probably grow something fairly quickly.
And
so
sorry,
like, I'm just now doing YouTube. I'm a late comer to this idea of launching on YouTube and doing all these other things, and I'm right now, I have a lot of YouTube content, but it's not for the street yet. So, like, and some of it shows up on websites as videos and stuff. I just want it on YouTube as a holding tank. But I know what to do on YouTube to kind of make it active. And so one of the things you're describing is that you're being raw, you're sharing your journey, you are ahead of others, or people are alongside you, and people are going to latch on to that. I'm going to follow this guy because I got the same shit.
Mm-hmm.
And out of 8 billion people on the planet, let's just say there's 2 billion English speaking people on the planet. Let's say it's only 1 billion English speaking people on the planet. Out of 1 billion English speaking people, I'll bet you there's probably several million people who are going through what you're going through.
Oh yeah.
So if you share your journey, you will have followers. So
like, even with our next conversation, like keeping in mind that we can do our next conversation as a practice run almost, but keeping in mind that, and I don't want to be an actor. I just want to be aware that we have an audience. Like when you're talking to a customer service and it's like, this call might be recorded. I totally fucking forget that I'm being recorded, or I might be getting recorded. But I mean, like, maybe just kind of walk into it, like, and kind of be like, maybe a small addressing of my audience. Like, hey, this is our first raw conversation, and this is where I'm at, and this is what we're trying to figure out.
Was it you who shared with me that guy? I think it was you who shared with me a guy who had some pontification he would did, and sometimes he's in a hammock, and sometimes he's in bed, and sometimes he's on some sort of chair. I can't remember if it was you who shared with me or somebody else, but the guy has basically, evolved in such a way that he's now saying things that are thought stimulants. He's not just talking about his journey. He's just saying, I had this thought, and this may not be politically correct, or it may not, whatever the case may be. but I'm wondering how many other people might, have a thought about this too. Is like, he put something out there, and then as time goes by, he's got more clarity on what he's saying is serving, and he ends up with even smarter commentary and things like that. I was kind of scanning through his history.
Yeah, I don't think that was me.
Okay, well, but the idea is that, at a certain point, you may want to ultimately unlist and archive the stuff that was sort of your baby steps or toddler steps or whatever the case may be. But it can be a great way to start and build an audience, and do it in a very organic way.
Yeah, and I also, I'm not saying that
ultimately everything's going to be about how are you connecting people to your message. So here's your homework. There will be 3 things you can write. You take it off the recording if you want. Just go to the end and pick it up.
No, I'll write it down. I was just going to say one more thing though.
Okay, go ahead.
About I don't think we have to be super worried about what we say. I just think that, because I hear crazy shit on podcasts, really pushing the envelope type stuff. So, I mean, but that's ultimately I just want to mention, I have this friend, Mark, who is in Seattle. And we had joked, like, I will ask Mark a question and he'll just go off. And because he's so real and so raw, and he doesn't like, he's a New Yorker. I mean, he from the streets of New York, who is, I don't know what degree black belt he is, but it's up there. He teaches calisthenics. He teaches, now he's training like senior citizens to defend themselves. He's a strength trainer. He's been Washington's strongest man for I don't know how many years in a row. He's about 65 now, or 60, maybe 62, 63. I don't know. But I was joking with him because we'll get on these calls, kind of like we did that one night. And it's just, I mean, we're just laughing the whole time. Like, we should start a podcast where I just come up with random questions to ask you.
Okay, well, why don't we have it like men talking? We'll just call it men talking.
Yeah, and let you. And I was like,
well, it won't be just me, because you're going to put your 2 cents worth in, but you can ask.
Yeah. And just let him go off for a while. He's like, I love it, and like, so anyway, I mean, I think you two would get along really well. But let's
start thinking about men talking.
Let's take this whole thing that's happening here and kind of maybe take that little thing that's right here and kind of start kind of pulling it into our.
Okay, I'm game. I'm game for. I never prepare for anything.
Perfect.
Because I consider myself kind of built-in prepared.
Well, this is going to be good for me because I care so much about what people think about me. So it'll just help me just tear down that
in
shit.
no time at all. You'll be relaxed about it. Okay, let's do it. I'm committed. You got me.
Okay. All right. So sorry that just popped in there. I was like, wait a second.
No, I think it's a great idea. Let's do it.
This could be good.
And if you want to invite, what's your friend with the karate studio?
Yeah, well, he's not. Yeah, I mean,
maybe we have him join us once in a while. You get guests. You get floaters that come and go.
We can have guests.
Right. So we'll call it men talking or something. We have to do some research to make sure we're not just copying somebody else's name.
Authentic bullshitting. We'll call it authentic BS.
I love it.
I'm gonna write that down.
I love it.
Authentic. I had another name that came up in my mind, like and it made me think of the one second. Made me think of the angry therapist, and because it was like I was thinking like real shit or some, I don't know, but like his,
Um,
but it's, yeah, I mean, I mean, I got halfway through and I'm just like, a lot of stuff is pretty obvious. But there's some stuff in there that's to think about. It's like kind of a daily thing, I guess.
right.
But
Okay, you ready for your homework questions?
yeah, the only thing I've written so far is authentic BS. I think
Okay,
that's
well, hold on to that because we'll have to get that YouTube channel up.
yeah, I can maybe start looking at how that works.
Yeah, all you need is a Gmail account and
Yeah, I have a YouTube account, so
right, but you probably want to open this one up as a separate. So get another email address under your Gmail and it's just open up another channel.
Maybe I can just see if I can get authentic BS at gmail.com.
That would be so cool.
Okay, I'll look into it.
So these 3 questions actually will illuminate a lot. It will tell you where you might still have things to think about, but it'll also tell you what may already fit. And it's going to be some.
Yeah, even maybe if I can't get authentic BS, I can get authentic B period S period, or but the authentic and the B need to be separated somehow. Anyway, what's your questions?
So the first question is, and just think you're sitting on a park bench and some guy comes over and asks these questions. Like, so you're sitting there and the answer needs to be kind of what comes out. First question is, what do you want the world to know?
Just like, what do I want the world to know?
Yep. Yeah. Now there may be multiple answers to this, but to think about the broad strokes, like if you only got to teach the world one thing, what do you want them to know?
I mean, I got something right now.
Okay. Second question is, why do you want the world to know it?
Okay.
Third question is, why are you the one to tell them? That last question is not a challenge to your authority. It's more of trying to explain how you're going to connect.
And these aren't easy questions.
Not at all.
And I don't know if do I need to focus it towards like what?
Right now, just let it stew on it, let it breathe in and figure out. You might find out that serving men is going to come way later than you intend because those questions may illuminate something new. May turn out this is how you you can, it takes about 250,000 followers on YouTube to actually make some reasonable money, but you can get paid to be on YouTube, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what if authentic BS leads to, $250,000, $300,000 a year of income? It's not that authentic BS is the entire aspect of your experience and your final days on the planet. It's just that all of a sudden, Disney World and Disneyland look like things you can do. For that matter, a trip to Costa Rica with, oops, whatever the package looks like.
Yeah.
So, you're not married to something by answering these questions. It just gives you a great idea what may be the first steps you take.
Okay. I mean, just,
And we revisit these questions regularly, by the way, because this is organic. What's important to you today may not be important to you in the future.
right. I mean, there's this thing that keeps coming into mind, and I don't know why. It's almost not even a serious.
But don't second guess it. What is it? Just say it. And then I'll
What
leave
do you
you,
want
maybe
the
I'll
world
leave
to
you.
know? What
Yep.
What do you want the world to know?
Mhm.
That we are hurtling through space on a giant rock. Why do I
Okay.
want the world to know it?
Mm-hmm.
Because if we can put that into perspective, it makes everything else that we're doing seem insignificant. Why am I the one to tell them? Because I've realized that in this moment, I realized that if we have that perspective that we're just on a giant rock hurtling through space, and if we all realize that, it would make the problems we feel like we have, the all the shit that we think is important to us, it puts into perspective what is, it gives us the opportunity to realize what is truly important in our lives.
Okay. You didn't quite say why you're the one to tell them.
Why am I the one to tell them?
Yep.
Well, that's the one I didn't have really an answer for.
Okay. And it's a very challenging question because it gets to the root of your story.
Why am I the one to tell them? Because I've wasted so much time in my life, so much of my life. It's not a waste because I learned from it. But I can tell them because now that I have that realization, I can do the things in my life, yeah, that matter. I don't know. That's a tough one.
Well, the answer to the question is in your story. Your journey is what answers the third question.
Yeah.
So I've learned things that I think everybody needs to know. My story, in terms of my lessons, I think people will appreciate and understand and connect with me over. So if the idea here is you want the world to know that we are powerful and insignificant at the same time. We are just specks of dust in the universe relative to the whole thing. So, you know, what does that mean to me, the other guy, the other people that are out there? So I want you to know that you may be small, but you are not inconsequential, or something to that effect. And why am I the one to tell you? Because I've learned this. My journey shows you how I've learned this. And you start sharing that perspective, which could be authentic BS in the beginning. So a year from now, those three questions will have different answers in all likelihood.
Yeah, and I don't even know if those are the answers for it.
Oh, but they are answers now. And I would say what comes from the gut like that are worth honoring. At least turn it over, play with it. And maybe one of the ways we'll play with it is we'll put together this thing called Authentic BS. And you're on an Apple, right?
I'm on an Apple with my computer.
Right. So if you're on an Apple, you probably have some built-in editing tools. I've never played with the YouTube editor, but apparently that's pretty good too. So so you can do a lot. I would say if we're going to do something like these back and forth discussion, Q&A, deep thoughts type of thing, work on getting yourself a green screen and some foreground lighting so that you can put something.
Well, I'm right in front of a window. See how wide I am.
Okay, so yeah, get
at night. It's very dark.
Right, so you probably need some lighting if it's a night conversation. And then, you know, there may be some agreements that will have to be made. Like, the conversation will always be 45 minutes or less, or 45 to 60 minutes, or 30 minutes or less. I personally feel like when you're doing YouTube video, people will always watch something that's 3 minutes or less, or 3 hours, you know, 2 hours, or whatever the case may be, for whatever reason. So maybe it should be no time constraints, just till the conversation reaches a natural conclusion or whatever. But it could very well be that whatever gets done, we end up peeling out 3 minutes and using that 3 minutes as teaser. And so you have authentic BS shorts and authentic BS. You know, it's the same channel, but and then just put stuff out there. I like the idea. I think it's a great idea. So at this point, we're doing it, right?
We'll see.
What do you mean we'll see?
Sure.
Okay. If you're not doing it, I'm going to go find some other guys to talk to.
Yeah. Let's do it.
I scheduled at 4 o'clock, not confident that we were going to use the full 2.5 hours or maybe more. Somebody
oh shit, it's 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
You better go.
Yeah.
All right, man.
So, but let's, next Sunday, same time.
Sure.
Okay. I'm going to put it in every Sunday until we conclude we're not doing it. So.
Well, yeah, because the journey thing, if I do that, it'll be at 9 for 2 hours.
Okay. So, and you probably need fuel or whatever. So we can schedule a little bit later if we're going to still do every Sunday. But for now, I'll put it in at 10:30.
All right, cool.
Okay.
All right. Enjoy. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you. Keep well.
You too.